morning sun cast golden streaks across the marble floors of the penthouse suite, but Marcus Wellington barely noticed. He stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan apartment, 30 stories above the city that had made him one of the wealthiest men in America. At 34, he had everything money could buy: properties on 3 continents, a private jet, cars that cost more than most homes, and a fortune that grew even while he slept. Yet as he stared at his reflection in the glass, he saw a man whose eyes held no spark of genuine joy. The previous night had been the final straw. Another gala, another woman hanging on his arm. This time it was Victoria, a stunning socialite who had professed her undying love for him between champagne toasts. He'd overheard her conversation with a friend in the coat room, her voice dripping with calculation as she discussed the prenuptial agreement she'd have her lawyers negotiate. 5 years, that's all I need to stick it out, she'd laughed. Then I'll be set for life. Marcus had walked out of the benefit without a word, leaving his security detail scrambling to follow. He'd driven himself home for the first time in years, his hands gripping the steering wheel as questions hammered through his mind. When was the last time someone had looked at him and seen Marcus, not Marcus Wellington of Wellington Technologies? When had anyone genuinely cared about his thoughts, his dreams, his fears? The answer was devastating in its simplicity. Never. At least not since his grandfather had passed away 15 years ago, leaving him the company that would become an empire. Every relationship since then had been tainted by his wealth. Friends who wanted investments, women who wanted jewelry, business associates who wanted partnerships. Even his own family seemed more interested in their trust funds than in actually knowing him. Marcus turned from the window and surveyed his opulent surroundings. The apartment was a showpiece, decorated by an award-winning designer who'd charged more than most people earned in a decade. Yet it felt as cold and impersonal as a hotel lobby. Nothing here reflected who he truly was, assuming he even knew anymore. An idea had been forming in his mind throughout the sleepless night. Wild and potentially reckless, but thrilling in a way nothing had been for years. What if he simply disappeared? Not permanently, but long enough to experience life as an ordinary person. Long enough to discover if anyone could love him when stripped of the trappings of wealth. Long enough to find out who Marcus really was beneath the designer suits and corporate facade. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his phone and dialed his attorney's private line. "Richard, I need you to arrange something unusual," Marcus said when the man answered. "And it needs to stay completely confidential." 2 hours later, Marcus sat in Richard's office outlining a plan that made the veteran attorney's eyebrows climb higher with each detail. He wanted to create a new identity, legal but untraceable to the Wellington name. He'd need a modest apartment in a working-class neighborhood, basic clothes, and a simple job. His assets would be managed by Richard and a small trusted team. To the world, Marcus Wellington would be taking an extended private sabbatical. The tabloids would speculate, but they always did. "Marcus, are you certain about this?" Richard asked, his expression grave. "You'll be giving up all security, all protection. If anyone discovers who you really are, that's exactly the point, Richard. I need to know if someone can care about me without knowing. I need to understand what it means to work for a living, to struggle, to be—" Marcus searched for the word, "real." Richard studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Where do you want to go?" Marcus thought of the cities where Wellington Technologies had no offices, where his face wouldn't be recognized from business journals or society pages. "Somewhere with mountains," he said finally. "Somewhere quiet. Maybe Colorado." "Ashford Falls," Richard suggested. "Small mountain town, population about 20,000. Beautiful scenery, tourist economy. You could blend in easily, especially during the busy season. We have a small satellite office there, actually. Just IT consulting, nothing high profile." Marcus felt something stir in his chest that he barely recognized. Anticipation. "Perfect. How soon can you arrange it?" "Give me 2 weeks." As Marcus left the office building, he felt lighter than he had in years. He was really going to do this. He was going to step away from everything he'd known and discover who he could become. The risk was enormous, not financially, but personally. What if he failed? What if he discovered that there was nothing beneath the wealth, no core self-worth knowing or loving? But the alternative, continuing this hollow existence, forever wondering, was unacceptable. Marcus Wellington was about to disappear. And maybe, Just maybe Marcus Reed, the name Richard had suggested for his new identity, would finally find something real. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in the doorway of a one-bedroom apartment in Ashford Falls, Colorado, holding 2 duffel bags containing everything he'd allowed himself to bring. The space was smaller than his walk-in closet back in Manhattan, with worn carpet, second-hand furniture, and a kitchenette that looked like it dated from the 1980s. A far cry from his penthouse, but as he set down his bags and looked out the window at the mountain peaks visible in the distance, he felt something unexpected. Relief. The transformation had been thorough. Marcus Reed's identity came with a work history in IT support, a modest credit score, and a job waiting at Tech Solutions, a small company that provided computer services to local businesses. He'd traded his tailored suits for jeans and simple button-down shirts purchased at an outlet mall, an experience that had been both humbling and oddly liberating. His luxury watches were locked in Richard's safe. He now wore a simple Timex that had cost less than $20. Looking in the mirror that morning, Marcus had barely recognized himself. His usually impeccably styled hair was simpler, slightly longer. Without the aura of wealth and power, he looked younger, more approachable, more ordinary, exactly what he'd wanted. His first day at Tech Solutions began at 8 o'clock Monday morning. The office occupied the second floor of a building on Main Street, sandwiched between a coffee shop and a bookstore. Marcus arrived 15 minutes early, his stomach churning with nerves he hadn't felt since his first day of college. What if someone saw through his facade? What if he couldn't handle the work despite his engineering degree? What if this whole experiment fell apart before it began? "You must be the new guy!" A booming voice made Marcus turn. A large man in his 50s with a salt and pepper beard extended a hand. "Tom Brennan, owner of this little operation." "You're Marcus Reed, right?" "That's me," Marcus said, shaking the offered hand. Tom's grip was firm but friendly. "Great. Come on, I'll show you around." Tom led him through a small bullpen where 5 other people worked at cluttered desks. "We're not fancy, but we do good work. Most of our clients are local shops and small businesses. Nothing too complicated, mainly troubleshooting, networking, some web design." "Your resume said you've got IT experience?" Marcus nodded, grateful that Richard had constructed a believable backstory. "Worked at a few small firms on the East Coast. Wanted a change of scenery. Well, you came to the right place. These mountains will clear your head better than any therapy." Tom grinned. "Let me introduce you to the team." The other employees were friendly but busy, offering quick waves and promises to chat at lunch. Marcus settled into a desk with an older model computer and spent the morning familiarizing himself with their ticketing system. The work itself wasn't challenging for someone with his technical background, but the environment was entirely foreign. People ate lunch at their desks. The coffee was instant, not artisanal. When someone's computer crashed, they dealt with it themselves rather than calling a dedicated IT department. By the end of the day, Marcus was exhausted in a way he hadn't been from board meetings or negotiations. This was physical tiredness from being on his feet helping clients, mental fatigue from staying alert to his new role, and emotional weariness from constant vigilance about maintaining his cover. Yet underlying it all was satisfaction. He'd made it through day 1. "Hey, Marcus." One of his co-workers, a young woman named Sarah with bright purple streaks in her hair, called out as they were packing up. "Some of us grab dinner at the diner down the street on Mondays. Want to join?" Marcus hesitated. Part of him wanted to retreat to his apartment and process the day alone. But isn't this exactly what he'd come here for, genuine connections? "Sure, that sounds great." The diner was a local institution, clearly, with red vinyl booths and a menu that hadn't changed in decades. Marcus found himself squeezed into a booth with Sarah, Tom, and 2 others from the office, splitting a plate of nachos and listening to stories about difficult clients and computer mishaps. For the first time in years, no one was trying to impress him or pitch him business deals. They were just talking, laughing, being human. "So Marcus, what brought you to Ashford Falls?" Sarah asked between bites of her burger. "Pretty different from the East Coast." "Just needed a fresh start," Marcus said, keeping his answer deliberately vague. "Sometimes you have to shake up your life to remember who you are." Tom raised his water glass. "I'll drink to that. Did the same thing myself 20 years ago. Left a corporate job in Denver. Moved up here, never looked back. Don't you miss it?" Marcus asked. "The excitement, the opportunities, the ulcers, the politics, the feeling like you're just a cog in a machine?" Tom shook his head. Not for a second. Here, I know my clients. I know my employees. When I fix someone's computer, they bring me cookies to say thanks. That's worth more than any corporate bonus. Marcus absorbed this, testing the words against his own experience. In his world, success was measured in billions, market share, quarterly earnings. He'd never had a client bring him cookies. Most of his business associates wouldn't know his favorite flavor of anything. As they left the diner, Sarah fell into step beside him. You settling in okay? Need any recommendations for good hiking trails or anything? I'd appreciate that, Marcus said. I haven't done much exploring yet. There's a trail just outside town leads up to Clearwater Falls. Great for weekend mornings. Maybe I'll see you there sometime. She smiled, genuine and uncomplicated, before heading to her car, walking back to his apartment under a canopy of stars more brilliant than any he'd seen in the city. Marcus felt the weight of his decision settling in. He was truly doing this. Marcus Wellington had disappeared, and Marcus Reed was finding his footing in a world he'd never imagined. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that was simultaneously strange and comforting. Marcus woke at 6:30 instead of 5, made his own coffee instead of having it prepared by staff, and walked to work instead of being driven. The work itself was straightforward, occasionally tedious, but he found unexpected satisfaction in solving problems for grateful clients. Mrs. Patterson, who owned the bakery on 3rd Street, nearly cried when he recovered photos from her crashed computer, pictures of her late husband she'd thought were lost forever. Mr. Chen, who ran the local hardware store, shook his hand so vigorously after Marcus set up his new inventory system that Marcus thought his arm might come off. These small moments of genuine appreciation filled something hollow inside him that years of corporate accolades never had. But the adjustment wasn't without challenges. Marcus had never paid his own utility bills before, and the first time his electricity was threatened with disconnection because he'd forgotten to mail the check, he experienced a jolt of panic that felt absurdly disproportionate to someone worth billions. He learned to budget his modest paycheck, to comparison shop at the grocery store, to fix things himself rather than calling for service. The physical toll surprised him too. His back ached from crawling under desks to check cables. His hands got dirty. He came home tired in a way that felt honest and earned, but also made him realize how cushioned his previous life had been. Money, he was discovering, didn't just buy luxury, it bought comfort, convenience, and the invisibility of 1,000 small struggles. One Saturday morning, he decided to take Sarah's suggestion and hike up to Clearwater Falls. The trailhead was only a mile from his apartment, accessible on foot. As he started up the path, carrying only a water bottle and wearing the hiking boots he'd purchased at a discount store, he marveled at how light he felt. No security detail trailing behind, no phone buzzing with urgent messages, just him, the mountain, and the possibility of something beautiful ahead. The trail wound through pine forests, the air sharp with their scent. Birds called from the branches. His legs burned as the path steepened, but it was a good burn, honest effort producing forward motion. How long had it been since he'd done something this simple, this real? On your left, a voice called out behind him. Marcus stepped aside as a runner passed and then stopped. It was Sarah, her purple-streaked hair pulled back in a ponytail, barely winded despite the climb. She stopped too, jogging in place. Marcus, you actually came. You said it was worth seeing, he replied, noting how natural she looked here. Part of the landscape in a way his Manhattan associates never seemed to be part of their environment. First time up? When he nodded, she grinned. Oh, you're in for a treat. The falls are gorgeous this time of year. Mind if I join you? I usually do another lap, but I could use the company. They continued together, Sarah pointing out landmarks and local wildlife. She talked easily about growing up in Ashford Falls, leaving for college in Denver, then returning. I thought small-town life would feel limiting after the city, she admitted as they navigated a steep section. But I realized the city was what limited me. Too much noise, too many expectations. Here I can just be Sarah. Marcus understood that more than she knew. When they reached the falls, he stopped in his tracks. Water cascaded down a 50-foot cliff face, creating mist that caught the morning sunlight in a rainbow arc. The roar of the water drowned out everything else. Thoughts, worries, the complicated weight of his deception. For a moment, he was simply present, simply aware of beauty that existed regardless of wealth or status. It's incredible, he breathed, right? Sarah sat on a flat rock near the pool at the base of the falls. I come here when I need to remember what matters. Kind of hard to worry about your computer problems or relationship drama when you're looking at something that's been here for thousands of years. Marcus sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. Relationship drama? She laughed a little ruefully. Just got out of a 3-year thing. He wanted me to move back to the city, climb the corporate ladder, make more money. Didn't understand why I was content here. She skipped a stone across the pool. But content isn't settling, you know? It's knowing what you value and refusing to trade it for something that looks shinier. Her words struck deep. Wasn't that exactly what he'd spent years doing? Chasing shinier, bigger, more impressive achievements while his actual life, his actual self, shrank in the shadow of his fortune? I think you're wise, Marcus said quietly. It takes courage to know what you want and stick with it. Sarah turned to look at him, really look at him, and he felt suddenly exposed under her gaze. Could she see through the simple clothes and modest job to the man hiding beneath? But her expression was open, curious. What do you want, Marcus Reed? The question hung between them, heavy with more meaning than she could know. What did he want? He'd thought it was to be loved for himself, but maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe he just wanted to be himself without performance or pretense. I'm still figuring that out, he said finally, honestly. She smiled. That's fair. You've got time. They sat in companionable silence, watching the water fall and fall and fall, constant and indifferent to their small human complications. Eventually, they hiked back down together, and Sarah invited him to a game night she was hosting the following Friday. Nothing fancy, she promised. Just some friends, pizza, terrible puns during Pictionary. Very low-key. Marcus accepted, and as they parted ways at the base of the trail, he realized something had shifted. The experiment was no longer just about proving he could live without money. It was becoming something else, an exploration of who he might be if he'd never had wealth in the first place. And that person, he was beginning to suspect, might be someone he actually liked. Game night at Sarah's apartment was unlike anything Marcus had experienced in his previous life. The space was small and cluttered with plants, books, and mismatched furniture that somehow formed a cohesive whole. 6 people crowded around a coffee table covered in pizza boxes and board games, arguing good-naturedly about rules and keeping score with more creativity than accuracy. There was Jake, a kindergarten teacher with an endless supply of silly voices, Emma and David, a couple who ran the local bookstore and finished each other's sentences, Chris, a forest ranger with stories about tourist mishaps that had everyone in tears, and Miguel, a musician who played weekends at the local brewery. None of them cared about quarterly earnings or stock portfolios. They cared about who had the best strategy for Settlers of Catan and whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Marcus found himself laughing harder than he had in years as Jake drew increasingly ridiculous pictures during Pictionary, protesting that his artistic limitations shouldn't count against his team. When it was Marcus's turn to draw a stock market, he deliberately sketched something abstract, unwilling to reveal how intimately familiar he was with the concept. Sarah guessed chaos, which was close enough that everyone decided it counted. You're quiet, Marcus, Emma observed during a break between games, but you notice things. I can tell. Old habit, Marcus said, realizing it was true. Years of board meetings had taught him to observe, to listen, to note what people weren't saying as much as what they were. Here, though, he was using that skill differently. Not to gain advantage, but to understand and appreciate the people around him. It's nice, Sarah said, handing him another slice of pizza. Some people just fill the air with noise. You make space for others. The casual compliment warmed him more than any business praise ever had. These people were getting to know Marcus Reed, the person he was building day by day, and they seemed to genuinely like him. Not for what he could do for them, but for how he showed up. As the evening wound down and people began to leave, Sarah asked Marcus to stay and help clean up. They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes before she spoke. Can I ask you something? Marcus felt a spike of anxiety. Sure. You're different than most people who move. Here, there's something. She paused, searching for words. It's like you're discovering everything for the first time, even ordinary things. Like you're amazed by takeout pizza or board games. Most people take that stuff for granted. His heart hammered. Had he been too obvious? Was his cover blown? I've just been through a lot, he said carefully, trying to appreciate the simple things I might have overlooked before. Sarah nodded, accepting this. I get that. Sometimes we need to lose something to realize what matters. She smiled. Well, whatever brought you here, I'm glad you came. To Ashford Falls, I mean. And to game night. Me too, Marcus said, and meant it completely. Walking home that night, he thought about the two lives he was living, or rather, the one life he'd left behind and the one he was building. Richard called weekly for updates, and each time, Marcus found it harder to discuss Wellington technologies and board decisions. Those problems felt abstract, distant. Here, he was dealing with Mrs. Patterson's computer, or debating pizza toppings, and somehow that felt more real. The following week brought an unexpected challenge. Tom called Marcus into his office on Thursday morning, his expression concerned. I need to talk to you about something. Marcus's stomach dropped. Had someone discovered his identity? Was he about to lose this life he'd been building? The Henderson account, Tom continued, and Marcus relaxed slightly. Just business. They're our biggest client, and they're having major network issues. I'm sending you to handle it tomorrow. It's important we get this right. Henderson Properties owned several commercial buildings in the area. Important to tech solutions? Certainly, but Marcus had negotiated with Fortune 500 CEOs. How hard could this be? I'll take care of it. The next morning, Marcus arrived at Henderson Properties' main office to find controlled chaos. Servers were down, phones weren't working, and a harried receptionist pointed him toward the back. Mr. Henderson's office, he's not happy. Charles Henderson turned out to be a man in his 60s with a red face and a booming voice. About time. Do you know how much money we're losing every minute these systems are down? Marcus felt the familiar reflex to take control, to speak with the authority of someone who'd managed crises affecting millions. But Marcus Wellington could do that. Marcus Reed was just an IT guy trying to do his job. I understand, sir. Let me take a look at your servers. The problem, once he located it, was significant but fixable, a failed network switch that needed replacing. However, Henderson hadn't maintained proper backups, and restoring everything would take hours of careful work. As Marcus worked, Henderson hovered, complaining about costs and incompetence. Your company better not charge me for this, Henderson snapped. This is your equipment failure. It wasn't, but Marcus bit back the retort. Instead, he focused on the work, methodically rebuilding the network. Hours passed. Henderson continued his tirade, criticizing Marcus's speed, his methods, his company. In his previous life, Marcus would have had such a person removed from the room. Here, he had to simply endure it while doing his job. By late afternoon, the systems were running again. Marcus was exhausted, his shirt stuck to his back with sweat. From the overheated server room, his patience worn thin, Henderson inspected the work with a critical eye, then grudgingly nodded. I suppose it'll do. Tell Tom I'll be watching my bill closely. No thanks. No acknowledgement of the hours of work. Just suspicion and continued hostility. As Marcus packed his tools, he felt the weight of a truth he'd intellectually understood but never really felt. Most people struggled not just with money, but with basic dignity. With being treated as disposable, as servants, as less than human. Tom called as Marcus was driving back. Henderson just phoned. Said you did good work but took too long. Tom's voice carried an apologetic note. I know he's difficult. Thanks for handling it. Just doing my job, Marcus said. But he felt shaken. In one day, he'd experienced more dismissive treatment than in his entire previous life. And this was mild compared to what many people faced daily. The realization was humbling and infuriating in equal measure. That evening, Sarah texted asking if he wanted to grab dinner at the diner. Marcus almost declined, wanting to retreat and process, but forced himself to go. When he arrived, she took one look at his face and ordered coffee immediately. Rough day. He told her about Henderson, leaving out the details that might reveal his unfamiliarity with such treatment. I've never been talked to like that, he admitted, which was true enough. Sarah's expression softened with understanding. Henderson's a bully. Everyone knows it, but Tom needs that account, so we all smile and take it. She stirred her coffee. Welcome to working life for the rest of us. It's not always pretty. How do you do it? How do you maintain your dignity when someone treats you like you're nothing? She considered the question seriously. You remember that their opinion doesn't define your worth. Henderson's unhappy with his life, so he spreads that misery around. But that's his problem, not yours. You did good work today. You helped fix a real problem. That matters more than his attitude. Marcus absorbed this. Another lesson in the education he'd come seeking. Money hadn't just bought him luxury. It had bought him respect, whether earned or not. Without it, respect had to be earned through patience, through competence, through maintaining dignity, even when others tried to strip it away. You're right, he said finally. Thank you. Sarah smiled. What are friends for? Friends. The word resonated. These people, Sarah, Tom, the others, they were becoming real friends. Not networking contacts or business associates, but people who genuinely cared. People who saw Marcus Reed and liked what they saw. The question was, when they eventually learned the truth about who he really was, would they still? May brought warmer weather and a settled routine. Marcus had been in Ashford Falls for 2 months, and the town had begun to feel like home. He knew the best hiking trails, had a favorite booth at the diner, and could navigate the quirks of the tech solutions office with ease. More importantly, he'd developed genuine friendships. Sarah had become his closest friend. They hiked most weekends, grabbed lunch together regularly, and talked about everything from philosophy to their favorite childhood books. Marcus found himself sharing more of his real thoughts and feelings with her than he'd shared with anyone in years. Carefully edited, of course, to maintain his cover, but emotionally honest in ways that surprised him. He was also, he'd admitted to himself late one night, falling in love with her. It had crept up gradually. The way she laughed at her own jokes, her passion for environmental conservation, how she treated everyone with the same respect, from Tom to the homeless man who sometimes sat outside the coffee shop. Her contentment with a life that would seem impossibly modest to anyone in his former circles. She was genuine in a way he'd forgotten people could be. The problem, of course, was that she knew Marcus Reed, a construction he'd built from whole cloth. What would happen when she learned the truth? The question kept him awake at night. One Thursday evening, Sarah invited him to help at a community dinner she volunteered with monthly. We feed anyone who needs it, she explained. Homeless folks, families struggling to make ends meet, elderly people living alone. It's at the community center. Totally low-key. Marcus agreed, curious about yet another aspect of life he'd never directly encountered. The Wellington Foundation donated millions to hunger relief programs, but he'd never actually served food to hungry people. That evening, he found himself behind a steam table, ladling soup into bowls and offering servings of bread. The people who came through the line were diverse. Some clearly homeless, others who might have been his neighbors in the apartment building. A young mother with 2 small children, an elderly veteran, a middle-aged man who'd lost his job and couldn't yet admit to his family how desperate things had become. Each had their own story, their own struggles. God bless you, a woman told Marcus as he handed her a plate, her eyes wet with tears. You don't know what this means. The gratitude struck him powerfully. In his previous life, his donations had been abstract. Checks signed, press releases issued, tax deductions claimed. Here he saw the direct impact. Warm food filling empty stomachs, human connection easing isolation, dignity preserved through community care. During cleanup, Sarah worked beside him, washing endless trays and dishes. You were great tonight, she said. Some people volunteer once and never come back because it's too uncomfortable seeing poverty up close. But you really connected with people. It matters, Marcus said simply. This matters more than most things I've done. She studied him with that perceptive gaze. You've had money before, haven't you? Maybe not a lot, but enough to feel secure. I can tell by how you react to things here, like you're seeing a whole world you knew existed but never really understood. Marcus froze, his hands still in the dishwater. How did she see that? What makes you say that? Little things. The way you hesitated before buying generic brands at first, how you're amazed by community potlucks, the fact that you're genuinely good at budget technology solutions. But sometimes, you suggest fixes that would require equipment we can't afford, then catch yourself. She smiled gently. I'm not interrogating you, everyone has a past. I just want you to know that wherever you came from, whatever you left behind, you're doing good here. You're being real. Relief and guilt warred in Marcus's chest. She was giving him permission to have secrets while simultaneously seeing through them. Thank you, he managed. That means a lot. They finished cleanup in comfortable silence, but Marcus felt the weight of his deception more heavily than ever. Sarah deserved honesty. They all did. Yet revealing the truth would end this experiment before he'd fully understood its lessons. And selfishly, he wasn't ready to lose this life, not yet. The next week brought a different kind of challenge. Marcus's phone buzzed with a restricted number during lunch. He stepped outside to answer, already knowing it was Richard. Marcus, we have a situation. His attorney's voice was tense. There's been a hostile takeover attempt on Wellington Technologies. The board needs you back immediately. Marcus's heart raced. What, who? Grant Industries. They've been quietly accumulating shares and just announced their intentions. The board is panicking. Stock is down 15%. Marcus, I know what this experiment means to you, but the company your grandfather built is under attack. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the two worlds he'd been keeping separate slam together. Wellington Technologies employed 30,000 people. Its decisions affected millions of customers. He had responsibilities he couldn't simply abandon, but he also had Sarah, Tom, Mrs. Patterson, and everyone else who knew him as Marcus Reed. A life that felt more real than anything he'd experienced in the marble towers of Manhattan. How long do I have? He asked. The emergency board meeting is scheduled for Monday. 3 days. 3 days to decide between his old life and his new one. 3 days to choose between duty and authenticity. 3 days to determine who Marcus really was. I'll call you back, Marcus said and ended the call. He stood outside Tech Solutions, watching tourists browse the shops on Main Street, locals greeting each other by name. This town had taught him about community, about genuine connection, about the difference between price and value. But did learning those lessons mean he could abandon everything else? Sarah found him there. Hey, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Just got some news from back east, Marcus said, which was true enough. Family business stuff, complicated. Need to talk about it? He wanted to. He wanted to tell her everything. Who he was, what he was facing, how much these months had changed him. But the words stuck in his throat. Not yet. Maybe soon. She squeezed his shoulder. I'm here when you're ready. That night, Marcus sat in his modest apartment, his laptop open to news coverage of Wellington Technologies' crisis. The business media was speculating wildly about his absence. Some thought he was ill. Others suggested scandal. No one suspected he was living in a one-bedroom apartment in Colorado, earning $12 an hour fixing computers. The rational choice was obvious. Return to Manhattan, fight for his company, resume his real life. This experiment had been interesting, educational even, but ultimately it was just that, an experiment. His actual life, with all its responsibilities and complications, waited for him. But as Marcus looked around the apartment that had become his home, thought about the friendships he'd built and the person he'd discovered himself to be, the choice didn't feel simple at all. Who was Marcus Wellington, and who was Marcus Reed? Were they the same person? Or had he somehow become two men, each incomplete without the other? He had 3 days to decide, 3 days to determine which life was real, and which was the illusion. Marcus spent Friday in a fog, going through the motions at work while his mind churned through impossible choices. Return to Manhattan and lose everything he'd built here, or stay in Ashford Falls and watch his grandfather's legacy crumble. There had to be another option, a way to bridge these two worlds, but he couldn't see it. Saturday morning, Sarah texted suggesting another hike. Marcus almost declined, but the mountains had become his thinking place. Maybe the trail would offer clarity. They took a different route this time, one that climbed higher and steeper. Sarah seemed to sense his mood and didn't push conversation, letting the rhythm of walking and the beauty of the landscape speak instead. They were above the tree line when she finally broke the silence. Something's really bothering you, she observed, settling onto a flat rock with a view of the entire valley below. I won't pry, but I'm worried about you. Marcus sat beside her, the words pressing against his chest like a physical weight. He couldn't tell her everything, but maybe he could tell her something true. Have you ever felt like you're living two lives? Like there's who people think you are and who you actually are, and you're not sure which one is real anymore? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. I think everyone feels that way sometimes. We all wear masks, play roles. The question is whether the mask becomes the person, or whether we find the courage to take it off. What if taking off the mask means losing everything? What if people can't accept who you really are? Then they weren't really seeing you to begin with, Sarah said gently. And that's their loss, not yours. She turned to face him fully. Marcus, I don't know what you're running from or hiding from, but I know the person I've gotten to know these past few months is good and real and worthy. Whatever secrets you're carrying, and I can tell there are some, they don't change that fundamental truth. Her words broke something open inside him. She was offering acceptance before confession, trust before proof. It was exactly what he'd come searching for. Someone who could care about him without knowing his net worth. And here she was doing precisely that. There are things about my past I haven't told you, Marcus said carefully. Things that might change how you see me. Do they change who you are now? Here? I don't know, maybe, probably. Sarah smiled sadly. Then tell me when you're ready. But know that I'm not going anywhere. Friends stick around through complicated truths. The word friend struck Marcus with both comfort and pain. Was that all they were? All they could be? He'd been so careful not to cross lines, not to let his feelings show. But sitting here on this mountain with the woman he'd fallen in love with, pretending friendship was enough felt impossible. What if I wanted to be more than friends? The words escaped before he could stop them. Sarah's eyes widened, then softened. Marcus, I'm sorry. That was inappropriate. I shouldn't have. Stop. She reached out and took his hand. I've been hoping you'd say something like that for weeks, but I've also been worried because I can tell you're holding back, keeping secrets. I can't build something real with someone who isn't being real with me. If I told you everything, you might not want anything to do with me. Or I might understand why you've been hiding. You won't know until you trust me enough to try. She squeezed his hand. I'm not saying you have to tell me everything right now, but if you want us to become something more, eventually I'll need the truth. Marcus nodded, his throat tight. I need to deal with something back east first. Something important. But when I get back, I promise I'll tell you everything. And if you can't accept it, I'll understand. When do you leave? Tomorrow, probably. I don't know how long I'll be gone. Sarah studied him for a long moment, then leaned in and kissed his cheek softly. Come back. Whatever's waiting for you there, deal with it and come back. This place, we will be here. They hiked down in comfortable silence, hands occasionally brushing but not quite holding. At the trailhead, Sarah hugged him tightly. Be careful, Marcus Reed, and remember who you are here. Don't let wherever you're going make you forget. That evening, Marcus called Richard. I'm coming back. Set up the board meeting. Thank God, Richard breathed. I'll have the jet ready. When? No jet. I'll fly commercial. And Richard, we're going to fix this crisis. But then we need to talk about some major changes to how I run the company. What kind of changes? Marcus looked around his modest apartment, thought about Mrs. Patterson's tears of gratitude, the community dinner, Sarah's contentment with a life of purpose over profit. The kind that matter. I'll explain when I get there. He packed his duffel bag, the same one he'd arrived with, though now it felt like he was packing up a life rather than just clothes. Before he left, he wrote a note to Tom explaining he had a family emergency and wasn't sure when he'd return, but he'd be in touch. Then another to Sarah, because texting wasn't enough for what he wanted to say. Sarah, thank you for showing me what real friendship looks like and for seeing the person I'm trying to become. I meant what I said on the mountain. When I come back, I'll tell you everything, and I hope you'll understand. Whatever happens, these months have changed me in ways I'm still discovering. You've changed me. I'll be back as soon as I can. Marcus. He left both notes in their mailboxes in the pre-dawn darkness, then caught a cab to Denver International Airport. As Ashford Falls disappeared in the rearview mirror, Marcus felt like he was being pulled between two magnets, stretched impossibly thin. He'd gone to the mountains to find out if he could be loved without money.
He'd found something better. He'd learned to be a better person.
Now he had to figure out if Marcus Wellington could incorporate the lessons Marcus Reed had learned. The flight to New York felt endless. Marcus sat in coach, earning curious glances from other passengers who perhaps sensed something. incongruous about the man in cheap clothes who held himself like someone used to first-class luxury. He ignored their looks, focused on the battle ahead. Richard met him at LaGuardia with a car and a tablet full of briefings. "The takeover attempt is more sophisticated than we initially thought," he said as they navigated traffic into Manhattan. "Grant's been working on this for months. They have board support. Marcus, this could actually succeed. Then we'll fight smarter." Marcus scanned the documents, his business mind re-engaging like a muscle memory. Strategies formed, alliances to rebuild, counteroffers to make. Wellington Technologies wouldn't fall to a hostile takeover. But as the skyline of Manhattan rose before him, glittering with wealth and power, Marcus felt a pang of loss for the simpler life he'd left behind. The Wellington Technologies headquarters occupied 40 floors of a midtown skyscraper. As Marcus walked through the gleaming lobby Monday morning, wearing a suit that felt simultaneously familiar and foreign, he saw recognition ripple through the security guards and staff. Whispers followed his path to the executive elevators. "Mr. Wellington, thank God you're back." His executive assistant, Patricia, nearly collapsed with relief when he stepped off on the top floor. The board's already gathering in the conference room. It's been challenging." Marcus nodded, straightening his tie, a gesture that felt like donning armor. "I'm sure. Give me 5 minutes in my office first." His corner office was exactly as he'd left it 3 months ago. Pristine, impersonal, designed to impress rather than comfort. The view overlooked Central Park, a rectangle of green in the Steel Canyon. Once, this view had represented achievement. Now it just felt far from the mountains. He allowed himself one moment of doubt. Then he picked up his phone and started making calls. The emergency board meeting was contentious from the start. Grant Industries had made a compelling offer, and several board members saw it as an opportunity to cash out at a premium. Marcus listened to their arguments, noted who'd been swayed, calculated his opposition. This was the world he knew, the chess game he'd been trained for since childhood. "Gentlemen, ladies," he said when they'd finished presenting Grant's case, "I understand the appeal of their offer, but you're not just selling a company. You're selling 30,000 people's livelihoods. You're selling our customers' trust. You're selling my grandfather's legacy, and you're selling it to a corporate raider known for gutting acquisitions and selling off the pieces." "With respect, Marcus," board member Harrison Chen said, "where have you been? We've been handling a crisis while you've been, disappeared? Some of us feel you've abandoned your responsibilities." The accusation stung because it held truth. Marcus had abandoned his post, albeit temporarily and for reasons that felt important. But this board didn't know about Marcus Reed, about the lessons learned in a one-bedroom apartment, about discovering what truly mattered. "You're right," Marcus said, surprising them. "I have been absent. I needed to step back and gain perspective on what this company should be, and I've realized we've lost our way." He clicked to a presentation he'd prepared on the flight. "Wellington Technologies started with my grandfather's vision of using innovation to improve people's lives. But look at our priorities now. Stock price, quarterly earnings, shareholder returns. When did we forget about the actual human impact of our work? This is about the takeover," another board member said impatiently. "Not corporate philosophy. It's about both. Grant Industries wants to buy us because we're profitable, but we're profitable because we've cut costs, outsourced jobs, prioritized efficiency over quality. We're successful by conventional metrics while failing at everything that actually matters." Marcus advanced to his next slide. "I'm proposing an alternative. We restructure before Grant can acquire us. We implement profit sharing with employees. We invest in communities where we operate. We measure success not just in dollars but in impact. We become the kind of company people are proud to work for, not just one that generates returns." The room erupted in objections. "Shareholders will revolt. Stock price will tank. This is business suicide." "Or," Marcus said calmly, "it's how we save the company's soul while securing its future. Companies with engaged, well-compensated employees outperform their competitors. Corporate responsibility attracts customers and top talent. This isn't charity, it's smart business. But it requires thinking beyond next quarter." The debate raged for hours. Marcus held firm, presenting data he'd gathered during his months away, examples of companies that had thrived by prioritizing purpose over pure profit. Slowly, he saw minds beginning to change. Not all, but enough. By evening, they'd reached a compromise. Marcus would implement his reforms, but gradually with clear metrics. If performance suffered, the board could force a vote. It wasn't everything he wanted, but it was a start. As the board members filed out, Harrison Chen paused. "What happened to you, Marcus? That wasn't the man who left 3 months ago." "I found perspective," Marcus said simply. "Sometimes you have to step outside your life to see it clearly." The following days blurred together. Meetings with executives, press conferences to reassure investors, strategy sessions to counter Grant's bid. Marcus worked 18-hour days, leveraging every alliance and pulling every strategic lever he'd learned over years of corporate warfare. It was exhausting and all-consuming. The world he'd briefly escaped pulling him back in with overwhelming force. But he also implemented immediate changes. He announced a minimum wage increase for all company employees. He established a fund to support communities affected by their facilities. He personally called several laid-off employees to discuss potential rehiring. Small steps, but meaningful ones. A week into his return, Marcus was in his office late when Patricia buzzed. "Mr. Wellington, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent. Sarah Mitchell." Marcus's heart stopped. Sarah? Here? How had she found him? "Send her in." Sarah walked through the door and Marcus saw his two worlds collide in real time. She wore jeans and a sweater, looking utterly out of place in the executive suite's opulence. Her expression was a mixture of hurt, confusion, and determination. "So it's true," she said quietly, taking in the office, the view, the obvious wealth. "The rumors online. When you didn't come back, I started searching. Found articles about Marcus Wellington's mysterious return. Saw your photo. It took me a while to realize the billionaire in the expensive suit was the same man who helped Mrs. Patterson fix her computer." Marcus stood slowly, his mind racing. This wasn't how he'd wanted her to learn the truth. "Sarah, I can explain." "Can you?" Her voice was controlled, but he heard the emotion beneath. "Explain why you lied about who you were? Why you pretended to need a job that pays $12 an hour when you're worth billions? Was it amusing, Marcus, playing at being one of us?" "No!" "Sarah, it wasn't like that." "Then what was it like? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a rich man who got bored and decided to play pretend in a small town. Did you think we were quaint, simple? Did you laugh about us at night?" "I fell in love with you," Marcus said, the words tumbling out desperately. "I fell in love with you in that town, and the person I got to be there. I came to Ashford Falls because I wanted to know if anyone could care about me without my money. And you did. You saw Marcus Reed and you liked him. That wasn't a game. That was the most real thing in my life." Sarah's eyes were bright with tears. "But Marcus Reed doesn't exist. He was a lie. Everything we shared was built on deception. The person I was with you was real," Marcus insisted. "More real than I've been in years. Yes, I lied about my background, my wealth, but my feelings were genuine. The friendship, the connection, that was all true." "How can I believe anything you say?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking. "You're literally a master at corporate deception. This is what you do, convince people, manipulate situations. How do I know this isn't just another strategy?" The accusation hit hard because Marcus couldn't fully defend against it. He had manipulated the situation. He had deceived everyone. That the deception had led to genuine feelings didn't erase the dishonesty. "I don't know how to prove it to you," he admitted. "But I'm asking you to trust that the man you met on those hiking trails, who served food at the community dinner, who fixed computers for grateful small business owners, that man was me. This office, this wealth, it's part of me too, but it's not all of me. Maybe not even the most important part." Sarah wiped at her eyes angrily. "I came here to see for myself, to understand, but I don't. I don't understand how someone with everything could pretend to have nothing. I don't understand how you could let all of us believe in someone who didn't really exist." She turned toward the door, and Marcus felt panic rise in his chest. "Please don't go. Let me explain everything. The full story." She paused, her hand on the doorknob. "I'm staying at a hotel tonight, flying back tomorrow. If you want to explain, you know where to find me. But Marcus Wellington or Reed or whoever you really are, you need to figure out which version of yourself is actually true. Because until you do, I don't think you can be honest with anyone, including me." She left and Marcus sank into his chair, his carefully constructed worlds crashing down around him. He'd thought he could have both, his wealth and his authenticity, his company and his small-town life. But Sarah's presence here proved otherwise. The deception had consequences he hadn't fully considered. The worst part? She was right. He didn't know who he really was anymore. Marcus Wellington, the billionaire CEO, or Marcus Reed, the IT guy who'd found meaning in simplicity. Were they truly the same person? Or had the experiment revealed an irreconcilable divide in his identity? His phone buzzed with another crisis requiring attention. The battle for Wellington Technologies continued. But for the first time since returning, Marcus questioned whether winning this fight meant anything at all if he'd lost what truly mattered in the process. Marcus didn't sleep that night. Instead, he stared at the ceiling of his penthouse, the same ceiling he'd stared at 3 months ago when making the decision to disappear. Everything had come full circle, except now the questions were more complicated. He'd proven people could care about him without his money. Sarah had, but her caring had been based on incomplete information, and now she felt betrayed. Had he really learned anything? Or had he just created an elaborate justification for lying to good people? At dawn, he made a decision. He called Patricia and cleared his schedule for the day, something that sent shockwaves through the executive team still reeling from Grant's takeover attempt. Then he grabbed the address Sarah had mentioned and headed to her hotel. She answered the door in the same clothes from the night before, looking like she'd slept as little as he had. "I wasn't sure you'd come. I promised to tell you everything," Marcus said. "Can I?" Sarah stepped aside, letting him into the modest hotel room. The contrast with his penthouse wasn't lost on either of them. She sat in the desk chair while he took the edge of the bed, maintaining careful distance. "Start from the beginning," Sarah said. "Real beginning." "And Marcus?" "No more corporate polish, just truth." So he told her. Everything. His grandfather building Wellington Technologies from nothing, growing up with limitless wealth but feeling increasingly isolated. The endless parade of people who wanted something from him. Victoria's calculated comments about prenuptial agreements. The moment he decided to disappear and discover if anyone could love him for himself. "I chose Ashford Falls because it was small enough that I wouldn't be recognized but big enough to get lost in," he explained. "Richard, my attorney, set everything up. The identity, the job, the apartment. I thought I'd stay a few weeks, maybe a month. Just long enough to see what it felt like to be ordinary." "But you stayed longer," Sarah said quietly. "Because I discovered something I'd never had. Genuine connection. With Tom, with the clients, with everyone at game night. And with you." Marcus met her eyes. "Sarah, I know I lied about the details. But every conversation we had, every moment we shared, those were real. Marcus Reed might have been a constructed identity, but the person you got to know was me, maybe more me than I've been in years." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing. "What was it like, really?" "Living like we do." Marcus thought about how to answer honestly. Humbling, eye-opening, harder than I'd imagined. "The first time I had to budget my grocery shopping, I nearly panicked. When Henderson treated me like I was disposable, I felt rage I didn't know I could feel. But there were also moments of pure joy I'd never experienced. Mrs. Patterson's gratitude, Tom's easy friendship, your company with no agenda behind it." "Did you think you were better than us?" The question was quiet but sharp. "Did you pity us?" "At first, maybe there was some of that," Marcus admitted, wincing at his own honesty. "But that changed quickly. I realized you all had something I'd been missing. Purpose, community, contentment with enough rather than always chasing more. You weren't poor in the ways that mattered. If anything, I was." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "What happens now? You fought off this takeover or whatever it was. Are you going back to being Marcus Wellington full-time? Forgetting the rest of us existed?" "I don't want to," Marcus said fervently. "Sarah, these past months changed me. I can't go back to running the company the way I did before. I'm implementing real reforms, profit sharing, community investment, measuring success beyond quarterly earnings. The board thinks I'm crazy, but I know I'm right because I've seen what happens when companies only care about profits." "And Ashford Falls? Your apartment?" "Tom? Me?" Marcus leaned forward earnestly. "I want to come back. Not as Marcus Reed, I know that identity has to end. But as myself, Marcus Wellington, who happens to be a billionaire, but also someone who learned important lessons about what matters, if that's possible. If you'll give me that chance." "I don't know," Sarah said honestly. "Marcus, you hurt me. You let me develop feelings for someone who wasn't entirely real. Even if the emotions were genuine, the foundation was false. How do I trust that? I don't know, Marcus echoed. I can't undo the deception, but I can promise you this from now on, complete honesty. No more hiding, no more pretending. Yes, I'm wealthy. Yes, I run a major corporation. But I'm also the guy who helped Mrs. Patterson recover her photos and learn to budget, and discovered that fixing someone's computer can be as satisfying as closing $1 billion deal. All of that is true simultaneously. Sarah stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city. You know what the hardest part is? I fell for Marcus Reed, the person who lived simply, who appreciated small things, who seemed content with enough. But that wasn't sustainable. It was always temporary for you. You were always going back to this. She gestured at the skyline. How can those two people coexist? I'm still figuring that out, Marcus admitted. But I want to try. Maybe I can't live full-time in Ashford Falls. The company does need me, especially now. But I can split my time. I can bring the values I learned there into my work here. I can be authentic about both parts of my life instead of hiding one or the other. Sarah turned to face him. You're asking me to date a billionaire, to navigate a world I don't know, full of people who'll assume I'm a gold digger, to accept that the simple life I value might be complicated by yours. That's a lot, Marcus. I know, and I'm not asking you to decide right now, but I'm asking you not to close the door completely. Let me prove that Marcus Reed wasn't a performance, he was me learning to be authentic. Give me a chance to show you that Marcus Wellington can be authentic too. Sarah studied him for a long moment. I need time. I need to process all of this, figure out what I feel when I'm not so angry and hurt. And you need to figure out who you actually are. Not as an experiment or a role, but as a complete person. Can you do that? I'm going to try. With or without you, Sarah, I'm going to try. But I really hope it's with you. She managed a small smile. That's the most honest thing you've said. Okay, here's what I propose. You handle your business here. I go back to Ashford Falls and tell everyone the truth, because they deserve that from me if not from you. Then when you've got your crisis resolved and you've figured out what your life actually looks like going forward, come back, be honest about who you are, and we'll see if there's something real we can build on that foundation. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't rejection either. Marcus felt a flutter of hope. Thank you for listening, for understanding, even for being angry with me. You deserved better than deception. Yeah, I did, Sarah agreed. But I also know that people are complicated. We all hide parts of ourselves, wear masks, try on different identities. You just did it more literally than most. She moved toward the door, a gentle dismissal. Go save your company, Marcus Wellington. Then figure out if you can also save Marcus Reed. Because I think you need both. Marcus stood, wanting to hug her, to hold her, to somehow bridge the distance between them. But the gulf was too wide, the hurt too fresh. Instead, he just nodded. I'll see you in Ashford Falls soon. I hope so, Sarah said softly. I really do. Walking out of the hotel into the Manhattan morning, Marcus felt paradoxically lighter despite nothing being resolved. Sarah knew the truth. She was hurt, yes, but she was also willing to see if something real could be salvaged. That was more than he deserved and exactly what he needed. His phone buzzed with urgent messages. The crisis at Wellington Technologies continued, demanding his attention. But for the first time since returning, Marcus felt clear about his priorities. Save the company, yes, but also save himself. And maybe, if he was lucky and genuine and brave enough to be fully honest, save the chance at something real with the woman who'd helped him remember what mattered. The battle for Wellington Technologies intensified over the following weeks. Grant Industries wasn't backing down easily, and Marcus found himself in a high-stakes chess match played out through proxy votes, shareholder meetings, and media campaigns. He worked relentlessly, but differently than before. He thought about the employees whose livelihoods depended on the outcome. He remembered Mrs. Patterson's bakery, Tom's small business, all the people for whom corporations like his were distant forces that shaped their lives without ever seeing them as human. It made him fight harder and smarter. He reached out to employees directly, explaining his vision for the company's future. He talked to shareholders about long-term value over quick profits. He went on business news, programs, and spoke about corporate responsibility, with a passion that surprised the hosts expecting typical CEO platitudes. You sound like you've had some kind of conversion experience, one journalist observed. I have, Marcus admitted. I stepped away from the company for a while and learned what it's like on the other side. being the person affected by corporate decisions rather than making them. It changed my perspective on what success really means. The media loved the narrative. Marcus Wellington, billionaire CEO, goes on a journey of self-discovery and returns with a mission to transform corporate culture. Some praised him as visionary. Others accused him of naive idealism. Marcus didn't particularly care about either response. He was focused on doing what was right, not what was popular. Meanwhile, Sarah had returned to Ashford Falls and, true to her word, told everyone the truth. Tom called Marcus one evening, his voice a mixture of hurt and bewilderment. "Marcus Wellington," Tom said. "The Marcus Wellington? You were fixing computers in my shop while running a multi-billion-dollar company?" "I needed to understand," Marcus tried to explain. "I wanted to know what real life felt like." "Real life?" Tom's laugh was bitter. "Our struggles were real. Our bills were real. But for you, it was just an experiment? A way to feel authentic for a while before going back to your penthouse?" "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, Marcus? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like you used us. Used our trust, our friendship, our town. For what? Some kind of billionaire soul-searching?" The accusation hurt because it held truth. "You're right," Marcus said quietly. "I did use the situation. But the friendships weren't false, Tom. The person you got to know, that was me. Maybe the most honest version of me in years. But it wasn't complete, was it? You left out the part where you could buy my entire business with pocket change. Where one phone call could change everything for any of us. That's a pretty big omission." Marcus had no defense because Tom was absolutely right. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix it, but I am genuinely sorry. You and everyone else in Ashford Falls gave me something I couldn't find anywhere else. You treated me like a person instead of a bank account. That wasn't fake, even if my circumstances were." Tom sighed. "Sarah says you're planning to come back. To be honest about who you are and see if anything real can be built from here. That true?" "Yes, I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm hoping for a chance to prove I'm not the person you're imagining right now." "Fair enough. But Marcus, when you come back, you're going to face a lot of people who feel betrayed. Don't expect it to be easy." "I don't. But I owe everyone the truth and a genuine apology. I'll face whatever I need to face." After they hung up, Marcus sat for a long time feeling the weight of his actions. He'd thought his deception was harmless, just hiding his wealth to see if people would like him anyway. But he'd stolen their agency. He'd made it impossible for them to make informed choices about their relationships with him. That was its own kind of manipulation, even if unintended. The lesson was hard but necessary. Being authentic wasn't just about expressing your true self. It was about allowing others to see and respond to who you really were, completely. Anything less was still a performance. 3 weeks after Sarah left, Marcus finally cornered Grant Industries as CEO in a negotiation. The takeover attempt was faltering. Marcus's reforms had energized employees and impressed shareholders. Grant could keep fighting, but they were unlikely to succeed. "What do you really want, Grant?" Marcus asked during a private meeting. "Why my company specifically?" Victor Grant, a man in his 60s with silver hair and calculating eyes, smiled thinly. "You built something remarkable. But you've been running it like a charity lately. These profit-sharing schemes, community investments, their weakness. I'd have made Wellington Technologies lean, efficient, profitable." "You'd have gutted it," Marcus corrected. "Laid off thousands, sold off divisions, extracted maximum value before discarding the shell. I've seen your pattern. That's called business. It's called short-sighted greed." Marcus leaned forward. "I'll make you a deal. Withdraw your takeover attempt and I'll buy out your position at a premium. You make a healthy profit, and my company stays independent. Everyone wins. Except I don't get to acquire Wellington Technologies, which you were never going to do successfully anyway. This way you save face and money. Otherwise you lose both." After hours of negotiation, Grant finally agreed. Marcus paid more than the offer was worth, but it ended the threat definitively. Wellington Technologies would remain independent, free to implement its reforms and chart a new course. The news broke that evening. Marcus gave a press conference explaining the resolution and his vision for the company's future. "Business doesn't have to be a zero-sum game," he told the assembled journalists. "We can be profitable while also being responsible. We can create value for shareholders, while also creating value for employees and communities. It requires thinking beyond next quarter, but the companies that do this don't just survive, they thrive." Patricia found him after the press conference, smiling. You were magnificent. Your grandfather would be proud. Marcus thought about his grandfather who'd built the company but also worked himself to death by 60. I hope so. I'm trying to honor what he built while also correcting where we went wrong. It's a balance. Speaking of balance, Patricia said carefully, when are you going to Colorado? You've been checking your phone constantly for weeks, and I've noticed all the searches for flights to Denver. Marcus smiled ruefully. That obvious? To someone who's been your assistant for 8 years? Yes, go. You saved the company. Now go save whatever you found in that small town. She was right. The crisis was resolved. His reforms were being implemented. His executives could handle day-to-day operations. It was time to face what he'd left behind in Ashford Falls. Marcus booked a flight for the following morning. Then he did something he'd never done before. He called a town hall meeting for all Wellington Technologies employees, from executives to janitors. In the main auditorium at headquarters, with thousands gathered and thousands more watching remotely, he stood at a podium without notes and spoke from his heart. 3 months ago I disappeared, he began. I told no one where I was going or why. I want to explain that now because you all deserve the truth. I was lost. Not financially, obviously, but personally. I'd spent so long being a CEO, a billionaire, a board member, that I'd forgotten how to just be a person. So I went to a small town in Colorado, created a fake identity, and took a job fixing computers for $12 an hour. A ripple of surprise went through the audience. Marcus continued. I learned things I should have known already. I learned what it's like to struggle with bills, to be treated as disposable by difficult clients, to find joy in simple things. I made friends who knew nothing about my wealth and liked me anyway. And I fell in love with someone who saw value in Marcus Reed, the IT guy, without knowing about Marcus Wellington's bank account. Marcus paused, emotion tightening his throat. I deceived good people and I hurt them when the truth came out. I'm not proud of that. But I'm also not sorry I went, because those months changed me fundamentally. They taught me that this company, all of us, need to do better. We need to remember that behind every statistic, every efficiency measure, every corporate decision, there are real people with real lives. We need to be a company that those people are proud to work for and proud to serve. He outlined the reforms in detail. Profit sharing, community investment, evaluation metrics beyond pure profit. Some people will say I've gone soft. That business isn't about feelings or values. But I believe businesses are exactly about values. We just need to expand which values we prioritize. If we build a company people believe in, success follows. Not just financial success, but the kind of success you can be proud of when you look in the mirror. The applause was uncertain at first, then grew. Not everyone agreed with him. That was clear from some skeptical faces in the crowd. But enough did. Enough people wanted to work for a company with a conscience, with purpose beyond profit. That was a start. Afterward, Marcus returned to his office for the last time before his trip. He looked around at the luxury that had once seemed so important. It was nice, certainly, but it wasn't what mattered. What mattered was waiting for him in a small mountain town, possibly angry, probably hurt, but hopefully willing to give him one more chance. Marcus Wellington had saved his company. Now he needed to save himself. The flight to Denver felt longer than it had 3 months earlier, weighted with anticipation and anxiety. Marcus rented a car at the airport, a modest sedan, not a luxury vehicle, and drove the familiar route to Ashford Falls. As the mountains came into view, something in his chest loosened. Coming back felt like coming home in a way Manhattan never had. It was late afternoon when he arrived. He'd texted Sarah from the airport telling her he was coming but not asking permission. Some conversations had to happen face to face. She'd replied simply, I'll be at Clearwater Falls, our spot. Marcus drove to the trailhead, his heart hammering. Their spot. She'd called it that. Maybe that meant something. Or maybe she'd chosen it as a place to definitively end things. Full circle from where they'd first connected. The hike felt different now. Marcus knew he was walking toward a moment that would define his future. Not his financial future, that was secure, but his actual future, the one that mattered. Could he have both worlds? Could Marcus Wellington and Marcus Reed coexist? Could someone from Ashford Falls love a billionaire CEO? Or would the wealth always be an insurmountable barrier? Sarah was already at the falls, sitting on the same flat rock where they'd sat before. She didn't turn when he approached, just kept watching the water cascade down in its eternal pattern. "You came back," she said as he settled beside her, maintaining careful distance. "I promised I would. Crisis is resolved. Company is safe. Reforms are being implemented. Now I'm here to face the other part of my life, the part that actually matters." Sarah finally looked at him. "You look tired. Haven't been sleeping much. Too busy trying to figure out who I am and what I want." Marcus picked up a stone and turned it over in his hands. "I owe you an apology. Not just for deceiving you, but for not understanding how that deception stole your choice. You couldn't decide how you really felt about me because you didn't have all the information. That was unfair and wrong regardless of my intentions." "Thank you," Sarah said quietly. "That's what I needed to hear. Not excuses or justifications, but acknowledgement that you hurt me and why." "I did hurt you. I hurt Tom and everyone else too. I've been getting emails, some angry, some confused, some surprisingly understanding. But I needed to apologize to you in person because you deserved more than the lies I told." Sarah was quiet for a moment, watching the water. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about Marcus Reed being real even though the details were fake. And I think I understand now. We all perform different versions of ourselves in different contexts. You just took it further than most people do. Maybe, but the person I was with you, that wasn't performance. That was discovery. Finding parts of myself I'd buried or never developed." "So who are you really, Marcus? When you strip away the wealth and the job and the expectations, who's underneath all that?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "I'm someone who values genuine connection, who finds satisfaction in solving problems for people, who loves these mountains and simple dinners and board game nights with friends. But I'm also someone with responsibilities I can't abandon, who has the resources to make real change if I use them wisely, who needs to balance those two parts somehow." "Can you balance them?" Sarah asked. "Or will you always be split between two worlds?" "I don't know yet, but I want to try. And Sarah, I want to try with you." Marcus set down the stone and turned to face her fully. "I'm in love with you. Not with an idea of you or what you represent, but with you. Your values, your laugh, your ability to see what matters. I know I have no right to ask anything of you after what I did. But I'm asking anyway. Will you give me a chance to show you that Marcus Wellington can be as authentic as Marcus Reed? That my wealth doesn't have to define our relationship any more than your modest lifestyle would?" Sarah's eyes were bright with emotion. "I love you too. I realized that when I was angry with you, you can't be that hurt by someone you don't care about deeply. But Marcus, dating you means entering a world I don't know. Dealing with media attention, people making assumptions. Navigating a life of privilege I've never experienced. That's scary. It is scary. I won't pretend otherwise, but we'll figure it out together. You can teach me about the things that matter, and I'll teach you about the complicated world I come from. We'll make mistakes and learn and grow together." "What would it look like practically? You live in New York, I live here. Your work is there, my life is here." Marcus had thought about this extensively. "I can split my time. The company can run without my constant presence, I've learned that. I'll be in New York for board meetings and major decisions, but I can work remotely much of the time. There's this one-bedroom apartment in Ashford Falls I've become quite fond of. Maybe I could keep it." Despite herself, Sarah smiled. "That ridiculous apartment? You're a billionaire. You could buy a mansion, but I don't want a mansion. I want that apartment where I learn to be happy with enough. I want to walk to the office and grab lunch at the diner and hike these trails on weekends. I want the life I discovered here, not despite my wealth, but incorporating it appropriately." "You really mean that?" "I really do. Sarah, I can buy anything except what I found here. That's not for sale. It has to be earned through authenticity and genuine connection. I want to keep earning it." Sarah reached out and took his hand, the first physical contact since she'd left New York. "This won't be easy. People in town are hurt and angry. You'll have to face that, prove yourself again. And I need you to be completely honest going forward. No more secrets, no matter how well-intentioned. Complete honesty. I promise. And I need you to understand that I won't change who I am to fit your world. I'm not going to start caring about designer clothes or society events or any of that. If you want me, you get all of me, including my commitment to living simply and purposefully." "I don't want you to change," Marcus said fervently. "You're the one who showed me what really matters. Why would I want you to become like the people I was trying to escape?" Sarah studied him for a long moment, and Marcus felt his entire future balanced on whatever she was about to say. Finally, she leaned forward and kissed him. Gentle, questioning, full of possibility. "Okay," she whispered against his lips. "Okay, let's try. But Marcus Wellington, you're going to work for this, starting with facing everyone you deceived and proving you're worthy of a second chance." "I will. I promise I will." They sat together at the falls as the sun began to set, hands intertwined, talking about how to navigate their impossible situation. Sarah asked questions about his wealth, not because she cared about the money, but because she needed to understand this fundamental part of his reality. Marcus asked about her fears and boundaries, wanting to know what she needed to feel safe in this relationship. "My friends will think I'm crazy," Sarah admitted. "Dating a billionaire? That's like something from a movie." "My board will think I've lost my mind," Marcus countered. "The CEO spending half his time in a mountain town dating an IT support specialist? They'll question my judgment. Then we'll both be disappointing people's expectations. That's kind of appropriate, actually." As darkness fell and stars emerged above the mountains, Marcus felt something he'd been missing his entire life. Peace. Not the peace of having everything figured out, but the peace of knowing he was finally being completely himself. All the messy, complicated, wealthy, ordinary, striving parts together. And beside him was someone who could love all of it if he proved himself worthy. They had a long road ahead. Marcus knew that facing the town would be difficult, that integrating his two lives would require constant effort, that their relationship would face challenges most couples never encountered. But for the first time, he believed it was possible. Not easy, but possible. "Ready to go back?" Sarah asked eventually. "Face everyone?" Marcus took a deep breath. "Ready?" Hand in hand, they hiked back down the mountain in darkness, guided by flashlights and the certainty that whatever came next, they'd face it together. Marcus Wellington and Marcus Reed weren't two different people after all. They were integrated parts of one man who'd finally learned what it meant to be authentic. And that man was going home to Ashford Falls, where his real life was waiting. The next morning, Marcus prepared to face the music. Sarah had set up a meeting at the community center. Tom, the game night crew, Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Chen, and several dozen other people from town who felt betrayed by his deception. Word had spread quickly that Marcus Wellington was back, and people had opinions. Walking into that room took more courage than any board meeting ever had. These weren't people who could be swayed by data or strategic arguments. These were people he'd befriended under false pretenses, who'd trusted Marcus Reed, and now had to reconcile that person with the billionaire standing before them. "Thank you all for coming," Marcus began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I owe you an explanation and an apology. I'm not going to make excuses or try to justify what I did. I lied to you, all of you, about who I was, about my circumstances, about fundamental facts of my existence. That was wrong, regardless of my reasons." He explained his journey, the isolation of wealth, the desire to know if he could be loved without money, the decision to create Marcus Reed and live as an ordinary person. He talked about what he'd learned, how the town had changed him, why he'd stayed longer than planned. "But here's what I want you to understand," Marcus said, meeting eyes throughout the room. "The person you got to know wasn't fake. My feelings weren't fake. The friendships weren't fake. Yes, I hid my wealth, but the character you saw, someone who valued connection, who found joy in simple things, who tried to be helpful and genuine, that was me. Maybe the most authentic version of me in years." "Easy to be authentic when you know you can return to luxury whenever you want," Tom said, his arms crossed. "We don't have that option. Our struggles are real. Yours were just temporary." "You're right," Marcus acknowledged. "And I can't pretend I truly understand what it's like to struggle financially with no safety net. My experiment had an escape hatch. Yours don't. That's a fundamental privilege I'll never fully grasp." "So why should we forgive you?" Emma asked, not hostile but genuinely curious. "Why should we trust anything you say now?" Marcus took a breath. "You shouldn't necessarily. Trust has to be rebuilt, earned. I'm not asking for instant forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to prove I'm serious about being part of this community, not as Marcus Reed the fake person, but as Marcus Wellington who genuinely values what this town represents." "What does that look like practically?" Miguel asked. "It looks like transparency. You all know who I am now. There are no more secrets. It looks like contribution. I have resources that can help this community, and I want to use them thoughtfully, not as charity but as investment in a place I care about, and it looks like presence. I'm going to split my time between New York and here because this is where I want to build a life. With Sarah, Mrs. Patterson said softly, smiling at Sarah, who stood at the back of the room. If she'll have me, yes. She's teaching me what it means to value the right things, to find contentment in enough rather than always chasing more. The meeting lasted 2 hours. People asked hard questions. Some expressed anger, others confusion, a few surprising understanding. Marcus answered everything honestly, admitting when he didn't have good answers, refusing to deflect or minimize the harm he'd caused. Gradually, the mood shifted, not to forgiveness exactly, but to possibility. These were good people, and they recognized genuine remorse when they saw it. They'd liked Marcus Reed. Maybe they could learn to accept Marcus Wellington, wealth and all, if he proved himself worthy. I have a question, Chris the forest ranger said. What about Tom's business? You said you want to invest in the community. Tech Solutions could use capital to expand, but Tom's proud. He won't take charity. Tom shifted uncomfortably as attention focused on him. Marcus had been thinking about this. Not charity, Marcus said carefully. Partnership. Tom, you built something remarkable. A business that serves the community well and treats employees right. I'd like to invest capital for expansion, but you maintain operational control and majority ownership. It's a genuine investment, not a handout. If the business grows, we both benefit. But more importantly, the community benefits from better technology services. Tom studied him skeptically. Why would you want a piece of a small-town computer shop? It's nothing compared to your company. Because it's exactly the kind of business I want to support. One that prioritizes people over pure profit. One that builds community rather than just extracting value. Wellington Technologies is implementing reforms based on principles I learned here. This would be putting my money where my mouth is. I'll think about it, Tom said, which was more than Marcus had expected. The meeting ended without resolution, but without outright rejection either. People drifted out in small groups, discussing among themselves. Marcus felt emotionally exhausted, but also oddly hopeful. He'd faced the hardest part, honest accountability, and survived. Sarah approached as the room emptied. That was brave. It was terrifying, but necessary. Marcus took her hand. How did I do? You were honest. That's all anyone can ask. She squeezed his fingers. They'll come around. Most of them, anyway. This town believes in second chances if you prove you're serious. The following days, Marcus worked to prove exactly that. He met with Tom again, bringing detailed business plans for Tech Solutions expansion. He visited Mrs. Patterson's bakery and Mr. Chen's hardware store, offering technical help with their systems. Free this time, as genuine service, not a job. He attended the community dinner again, this time introducing himself truthfully and accepting people's reactions, whether warm or cool. He also started having difficult conversations with his New York team about permanently restructuring his schedule. Patricia was supportive, helping him figure out remote work arrangements. His executives were skeptical but agreed to try when Marcus made it clear this wasn't negotiable. The world is changing, Marcus told them during a video conference from his Ashford Falls apartment. Remote work is increasingly viable. I'll be available for crucial decisions, but day-to-day operations will run without my physical presence. If we can't manage that, we're not as competent as we think we are. Richard, his attorney, called one evening. I've been following the media coverage. Marcus Wellington finds love in small town, learns life lessons, transforms his company. The press is eating it up. Let them. It's all true. Some people say you've lost your edge, gone soft. Marcus looked around his modest apartment, thought about Sarah sleeping beside him, remembered the satisfaction of fixing Mrs. Patterson's computer. Maybe I have, but I'd rather be soft and human than hard and empty. Your grandfather would be proud, Richard said quietly. He always worried the company would consume you the way it consumed him. Sounds like you found a way to have both, the business and the life. After hanging up, Marcus stood at his window looking at the mountains dark against the starlit sky. Finding the balance wouldn't be easy. There would be times when business demands conflicted with personal commitments, times when the two worlds felt irreconcilable. But he was committed to trying, because the alternative, choosing one life over the other, meant losing half of himself. Sarah stirred and joined him at the window, wrapping her arms around him from behind. Can't sleep? Just thinking about how strange life is. 3 months ago, I stood in my Manhattan penthouse feeling like I had everything and nothing. Now I'm here and I actually have what matters. You're still figuring it out, though, Sarah observed. I can tell. You're worried about balancing everything. I am. What if I can't? What if the company pulls me back completely? Or what if staying here means I'm neglecting responsibilities? Then we adjust. Marcus, life isn't binary. You don't have to choose between billionaire and ordinary guy. You're both. Some days will lean more toward business, others toward simplicity. That's okay. What matters is that you stay authentic to your values in both contexts. Marcus turned to face her. How did you get so wise? Living simply gives you time to think, she said with a smile. Plus, I've been reading all these articles about you. Apparently, you're quite impressive when you're not pretending to be a mediocre IT guy. Hey, I was a good IT guy. You were adequate, she teased. But you're a genuinely visionary CEO. Those reforms you're implementing, they're making waves. Other companies are taking notice. You might actually change how business gets done. The possibility was humbling. Marcus had set out to change himself. Perhaps in the process, he could help change the systems that had made him feel so isolated in the first place. Companies that valued people over pure profit. Leaders who remained connected to the real impact of their decisions. Business that built communities rather than extracting from them. It's a lot of responsibility, Marcus admitted. Good thing you're not facing it alone. Sarah kissed him softly. Come back to bed. Tomorrow you can save the world. Tonight, just be Marcus, whichever version needs rest. As they settled back into bed, Marcus felt grateful for this woman who understood the complexity of his situation and loved him anyway. Who challenged him to be better while accepting his limitations. Who saw both the billionaire and the IT guy and loved the whole person they comprised. The journey wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. But Marcus Wellington, formerly Marcus Reed, currently and authentically both, was finally ready for whatever came next. He'd found what he'd been searching for. Genuine connection, purpose beyond profit, and the courage to be completely himself. Everything else was just details to be worked out along the way. 2 months into his new life arrangement, Marcus faced the biggest test yet. Wellington Technologies was hosting its annual shareholder meeting, a massive event attended by investors, media, and industry analysts. Traditionally, the CEO gave an address outlining strategy and fielding questions. This year, Marcus planned to do something unprecedented. He was bringing Sarah. Are you sure about this? Sarah asked as they prepared for the trip to New York. She stood in Marcus's apartment, their apartment now since she'd officially moved in, surrounded by clothes she'd never imagined owning. Marcus had taken her shopping, insisting she needed professional attire for New York. She'd compromised, accepting modest designer pieces that fit her values while meeting the occasion's demands. I'm positive, Marcus said, adjusting his tie in the mirror. You're part of my life. I'm not hiding that or asking you to stay in the background. Besides, you keep me grounded. I need that, especially at these events. Sarah studied her reflection uncertainly. The dress was beautiful, elegant without being ostentatious. But she felt like an imposter. What if I say something wrong? What if I embarrass you? Marcus turned and took her hands. You couldn't embarrass me. You're genuine and thoughtful and exactly who you are. That's what I love about you. The people at this meeting, half of them are performing roles, saying what they think others want to hear. You never do that. That's what worries me. These people speak a language I don't understand. Market capitalization, quarterly earnings, shareholder value. I fix computers and hike mountains. And you've taught me that there's more to life than those financial metrics. Sarah, I'm not asking you to pretend to be someone you're not. I'm asking you to be exactly yourself. That's the point. That's what will keep me honest. They flew to New York that afternoon. First class, which made Sarah uncomfortable, despite Marcus's explanations that comfort wasn't a moral failing. The city overwhelmed her. So much noise and concrete after months in the mountains. Marcus's penthouse felt like a museum. Beautiful but cold. She was relieved when he took her to a simple restaurant in Brooklyn, rather than some exclusive establishment. I used to think fancy restaurants prove success, Marcus admitted over dinner. Now I'd rather have good food and good conversation without the performance. How are you handling being back? Sarah asked. Full-time CEO mode again? It's strange. Parts of it feel natural. The strategic thinking, working with the executive team, solving complex problems. But parts feel alien now, like I'm watching someone else go through the motions. Marcus paused. Thank you for coming with me. I know this is uncomfortable. I love you, Sarah said simply. That means being here even when it's hard. But Marcus, I need you to remember who you are here. Not just the CEO, but the person you discovered in Ashford Falls. Don't let this world swallow that. The shareholder meeting the next day was exactly the spectacle Sarah had feared. Hundreds of people filled a hotel ballroom, investors dressed in expensive suits, financial journalists positioning themselves strategically. Marcus led her to the stage area where spouses and families typically sat. Several people did double takes, clearly recognizing Marcus Wellington, but uncertain about the woman in the modest dress beside him. Marcus's address was brilliant. He spoke about Wellington Technologies' performance, numbers that meant little to Sarah but clearly impressed the audience. But he also talked about the company's transformation, the reforms implemented, the focus on long-term value creation through employee engagement and community investment. Some of you have questioned these changes, Marcus said, his voice carrying to the back of the room. You've asked if I've gone soft, lost my business edge. I understand the concern. But let me share what I've learned. Companies are not abstract entities. They're collections of human beings making decisions that affect other human beings. When we forget that, we might maximize short-term profits, but we lose something essential: purpose, meaning, the reason any of this matters. He clicked to a slide showing employee satisfaction metrics alongside financial performance. Since implementing profit-sharing and community investment programs, our employee retention has increased 30%. Innovation metrics are up. Customer satisfaction is at record highs. And yes, our profits are up too. Not despite these reforms, but because of them. During the Q&A, an investor asked pointedly about Marcus's time in Ashford Falls. Mr. Wellington, can you explain your months-long absence? Some shareholders felt abandoned during a critical period. Marcus didn't flinch. I took time to gain perspective that I desperately needed. I'd lost sight of what this company should stand for. That absence was necessary for the transformation I'm now leading. I apologize for the uncertainty it caused, but I don't regret the decision. And the woman beside you? Another investor asked, gesturing toward Sarah. Rumors suggest she's from the small town you disappeared to. Is this relationship affecting your judgment? Sarah felt her face flush, but Marcus smiled. Sarah Mitchell has affected my judgment profoundly. She's made it better. She's reminded me what actually matters in life. Yes, she's from Ashford Falls. No, she's not involved in the business. But she's involved in my life, which makes me a better leader. Any other questions about the company's performance? The deflection was smooth but firm. Sarah felt simultaneously protected and exposed. These people were dissecting her, evaluating her worth, making assumptions. It was deeply uncomfortable. During a break, a well-dressed woman approached Sarah. You must be quite something to land Marcus Wellington. What's your secret? The condescension was thinly veiled. Sarah took a breath, channeling the honesty Marcus loved about her. I didn't land anyone. We fell in love. And the secret, if there is one, is treating each other like human beings rather than status symbols or business opportunities. Maybe try that. The woman blinked, startled, then walked away. Marcus, who'd overheard, squeezed Sarah's hand. That was perfect. I probably shouldn't have said that. You should absolutely have said that. She needed to hear it. The rest of the meeting went smoothly. Marcus's vision for the company won over most skeptics, and by the end, the applause was genuine. But Sarah was exhausted from hours of being scrutinized, evaluated, and whispered about. That evening, back at the Penthouse, she stood at the window looking at the city lights. I don't know if I can do this regularly. All those people judging, assuming I'm a gold digger or some small-town girl who got lucky. It's exhausting. Marcus joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist. I'm sorry. I should have prepared you better for how intense it would be. It's not your fault. It's just, this world is so different from mine. Everyone performing, calculating, positioning. It feels false. It often is. That's why I needed to leave. Marcus turned her to face him. Sarah, I'm not asking you to attend every business function or become a society wife. That's not who you are, and I don't want you to be. But occasionally, events like today matter because you matter to me. Can you handle that? Occasional exposure to this world. Knowing you can always go home to the mountains? Sarah considered. I can handle occasional. But Marcus, you need to handle occasional too. You can't get pulled back into this full-time. We need our life in Ashford Falls to be real, not just a vacation from reality. It is real. More real than this. He gestured at the opulent surroundings. This is just one piece of my life now, not the whole thing. They spent the next few days in New York, Marcus handling business while Sarah explored the city on her own terms. She visited museums, walked through neighborhoods, talked to regular people living regular lives amid the wealth and chaos. She began to understand the city better, not as a monolith of greed and ambition, but as a complex place containing multitudes. On their last night, they had dinner with Richard at a quiet Italian restaurant. The attorney studied Sarah with obvious curiosity throughout the meal. You're not what I expected, Richard admitted finally. When Marcus told me he'd fallen for someone from Ashford Falls, I imagined. Well, I don't know what I imagined, but not someone so grounded and articulate. Sarah smiled. You expected a simple mountain girl? Perhaps. Forgive me. I've been in corporate law too long. Richard turned to Marcus. She's good for you. I can see the change. You're still sharp, still strategic, but there's a groundedness that wasn't there before. She keeps me honest, Marcus agreed. Reminds me what's important when I start getting lost in quarterly reports. And he keeps me challenged, Sarah added. Makes me think about impact and scale in ways I never did before. It's a good balance. Flying back to Colorado the next day, Sarah felt relieved to leave the intensity of New York behind. As the mountains came into view, she felt herself relaxing, coming home to the place and life that fit her. Thank you for coming, Marcus said as they drove from Denver to Ashford Falls. I know it was hard. It was, but I'm glad I did it. I needed to see that world fully to understand what you're navigating. And Marcus, I'm proud of you. What you're doing at the company, it's genuinely important. You're using your privilege and power to make real change. We're making change, Marcus corrected. Your influence is all through this. The values, the priorities, the focus on what matters. That's you as much as me. Arriving back in Ashford Falls felt like exhaling after holding her breath. Their apartment was modest and simple and perfect. The mountains stood eternal against the sky. Tomorrow, Marcus would return to Tech Solutions, where he still worked part-time, and Sarah would resume her regular life. But they'd proven something important. They could navigate his complicated world together when necessary, while maintaining their authentic life here. That night, lying in bed with mountain stars visible through the window, Sarah felt certain about their future in a way she hadn't before. We're going to make this work, she said. Yes, Marcus agreed. We are. Because what we have is worth fighting for. And it was. It absolutely was. The following months settled into a rhythm that worked, if imperfectly. Marcus split his time between Ashford Falls and New York, using video conferences and remote work for most business matters, while traveling for crucial meetings. Sarah maintained her life and job in Ashford Falls, occasionally joining him for important events, but mostly staying grounded in the community they both valued. The town gradually accepted Marcus's dual identity. Tom had agreed to his investment proposal, and Tech Solutions was expanding, adding jobs and better serving the region. Marcus's technical skills, real and extensive once he stopped pretending to be mediocre, helped implement sophisticated systems. The relationship between Marcus Wellington, the investor, and Marcus, the part-time employee, was unusual, but it worked. Mrs. Patterson brought cookies to the Tech Solutions office one afternoon with an announcement. She'd decided to computerize her bakery's ordering system properly, and she wanted Marcus's company to handle it. Not because you're rich, she clarified, because you care about getting it right for people like me. The community dinner expanded with Marcus's quiet funding, serving more people and adding nutrition programs. He'd learned to contribute without overwhelming, providing resources without imposing solutions, supporting rather than controlling. Sarah helped him navigate that balance, teaching him the difference between helpful and paternalistic. Their relationship deepened as they learned to communicate across their different worlds. Sarah taught Marcus about contentment, about finding joy in simple things, about the importance of community and connection. Marcus challenged Sarah to think bigger, to consider how she might scale her impact, to dream beyond self-imposed limitations. You could start a nonprofit, Marcus suggested one evening as they planned a regional environmental conservation project. Focus on mountain ecosystems, climate adaptation. I could provide initial funding, but you'd run it. Sarah had hesitated. That feels too big. I'm just one person. You're never just one person when you're trying to make a difference, and you have expertise, passion, connections in this community. Why shouldn't you think big? Eventually, Sarah had agreed, launching the Mountain Futures Initiative with Marcus's financial backing, but her own vision and leadership. It was uncomfortable at first, moving from supporting roles to leading, but she discovered she was good at it, bringing people together, building consensus, creating change. Marcus's influence had expanded her world in positive ways, even as she kept him grounded. The annual game night crew had grown, adding new friends while maintaining its intimate feel. Jake brought his new boyfriend. Emma and David announced they were expecting. Miguel started teaching Sarah guitar. The group now knew Marcus's full story, and while some jokes were made about the billionaire who'd worked for $12 an hour, they'd moved past the betrayal to genuine friendship. So when are you making an honest woman of her? Chris asked Marcus one evening during Pictionary. Or are you waiting for her to propose? Sarah laughed. We're not in a hurry. But later that night, Marcus brought it up seriously. Are we not in a hurry? Because I am. I want to marry you, Sarah. I want this to be permanent and official. Sarah looked at him, considering. Marriage comes with complications in your world. Prenups, media attention, people making assumptions. I don't care about any of that. I care about you, about us, about building a life that's real and honest. Marcus took her hands. I'm not proposing right now. I want to do that properly. But I'm telling you my intentions. I want forever with you. Tears filled Sarah's eyes. I want that too. Just promise me one thing. Anything. Don't make it some elaborate public spectacle. Keep it between us. Something real and simple. That's exactly what I had in mind. 2 weeks later, Marcus drove Sarah up to Clearwater Falls at dawn. They hiked to their spot as the sun rose over the mountains, painting everything gold. At the falls, he pulled out a simple ring, not a massive diamond, but a beautiful sapphire that matched the Colorado sky. Sarah Mitchell, he said, his voice carrying over the water's roar. You showed me what it means to be human. You taught me that wealth and privilege are only valuable if they're used to build something meaningful. You've made me a better man, a better leader, a better person. Will you marry me? Will you help me keep learning and growing and staying true to what matters? Yes, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, absolutely, yes. They stood together at the falls where they'd first connected, where Sarah had offered acceptance before confession, where Marcus had finally understood what it meant to be authentic. The ring fit perfectly. Marcus had secretly gotten her size from one of her other rings weeks ago. They kissed as the waterfall cascaded eternally, constant and indifferent to human dramas, but somehow blessing this moment anyway. The wedding, 6 months later, was exactly what they'd wanted. Small, intimate, meaningful. They held it in Ashford, Falls at the community center, the same place Marcus had faced the town's anger and hurt. Now it was filled with the people who'd become family. Tom and the Tech Solutions crew, the game night friends, Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Chen, even several Wellington Technologies executives who'd made the trip west. Marcus's mother attended, initially, skeptical of Sarah but won over by her genuine nature. She's nothing like the women you used to date, his mother whispered before the ceremony. Thank God for that. Richard served as best man, giving a toast about how Marcus had gone searching for authenticity and found love instead. Or maybe, he concluded, those were always the same thing. To truly love someone, you have to be truly yourself. Marcus and Sarah figured that out the hard way, but they figured it out. Sarah's maid of honor was Emma, who talked about friendship and acceptance, and the courage to build something unconventional. These two aren't living a normal life, she said. But maybe normal is overrated. Maybe what matters is building something real, even if it doesn't fit anyone else's expectations. The ceremony itself was simple. They exchanged vows they'd written, themselves promising honesty, growth, balance, and love through all the complications. When the officiant pronounced them married, the room erupted in genuine celebration. At the reception, Marcus danced with Sarah to a song Miguel performed live. Looking around the room, at the friends who'd accepted him despite his deception, at the wife who'd taught him what mattered, at the community he'd learned to value, Marcus felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "Happy?" Sarah asked, her head on his shoulder. "Happier than I knew was possible. Even though you're married to someone who still thinks spending $50 on a dinner is extravagant?" Marcus laughed. "Especially because of that. You keep me grounded. You remind me what's real. And you help me dream bigger. We're good for each other." They were. Imperfectly, complicatedly, but genuinely. Marcus Wellington had gone searching for someone who could love him without his money. He'd found Sarah, who loved him despite it, not ignoring his wealth but not defining him by it either. And in the process, he'd found himself. As the reception wound down and guests departed, Marcus stood with Sarah on the community center's small porch, looking at the mountains silhouetted against the evening sky. His phone buzzed with messages. From New York, business never fully stopped, but they could wait until tomorrow. "Ready to go home?" Sarah asked. Home. Their apartment in Ashford Falls, where Marcus Wellington and Marcus Reed had finally merged into one authentic person. Where a billionaire CEO could live simply without pretense. Where wealth was a tool for positive change rather than a barrier to connection. "Ready," Marcus said, taking his wife's hand. They walked through the quiet streets of the town that had changed everything, past the diner where they'd shared countless meals, past Tech Solutions where Marcus still occasionally worked, past all the places that had become part of their story. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, balancing business and personal life, navigating two very different worlds, continuing to grow and learn and change. But tonight, they were simply Marcus and Sarah, walking home together under the stars, grateful for the journey that had brought them to this moment. And that, Marcus thought, was more than enough. It was everything. 3 years later, Marcus stood in the conference room of Wellington Technologies headquarters, presenting to the board with Sarah beside him. The company had transformed dramatically. Employee satisfaction was at record highs. Innovation metrics had soared, and yes, profits were up significantly. More importantly, Wellington Technologies had become a model for conscious capitalism, featured in business journals and studied by MBA programs. "The reforms we've implemented aren't just moral choices," Marcus explained, clicking through slides showing longitudinal data. "They're smart business. Companies that invest in employees, communities, and long-term value creation outperform those focused solely on quarterly earnings. We've proven that." Several board members who'd initially resisted his changes now nodded approvingly. Marcus had won them over not with appeals to ethics, but with results that spoke for themselves. Wellington Technologies was more successful precisely because it had embraced purpose beyond profit. After the meeting, Harrison Chen approached them. "I owe you an apology, Marcus. When you first proposed these changes, I thought you'd lost your mind, but you were right. About all of it." "We were right," Marcus corrected, gesturing to Sarah. "These ideas came from observing how good communities function. Sarah helped me understand that principles that work in a small town can scale to corporations if you're brave enough to try." Sarah had been working on her own initiatives. Mountain Futures had grown from a local conservation effort to a regional organization, partnering with government agencies and other nonprofits. She split her time between fieldwork in Colorado and policy advocacy in Washington, D.C., using her voice to protect the landscapes she loved. Their life was complex but fulfilling. They maintained the apartment in Ashford Falls as their primary home, spending roughly half their time there. The other half was divided between New York for Marcus's business responsibilities and D.C. for Sarah's advocacy work. It required constant coordination, flexibility, and compromise, but it worked because they'd built it on a foundation of honesty and shared values. Mrs. Patterson's bakery had expanded to 3 locations, all supported by Tech Solutions technology infrastructure. Tom's company now employed 20 people and was developing innovative systems for small businesses nationwide. The community dinner had become a model program studied by food security advocates. Marcus's initial deception had been wrong, but the relationships built in its aftermath had generated real positive change. Their home in Ashford Falls had become a gathering place. Game nights were monthly traditions. Hiking groups formed. The community embraced both Marcus and Sarah fully, not despite their complicated life, but because of how they navigated it with authenticity. One evening, after particularly long days for both of them, they sat on their small balcony watching the sunset paint the mountains pink and gold. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you'd never come to Ashford Falls," Sarah mused. "If you'd stayed Marcus Wellington exclusively, never created Marcus Reed. I'd probably still be alone in that penthouse, wondering why success felt so empty," Marcus admitted. "Or I'd have married someone like Victoria, both of us performing roles in a relationship built on calculation rather than care. And I'd still be living small, never realizing I could make a bigger impact. We needed each other." Marcus pulled her closer. "I came here looking for someone who could love me without money. But you taught me something more important, that authenticity isn't about hiding parts of yourself. It's about integrating all of who you are and finding someone who can love the whole complicated truth." "You taught me things too," Sarah said. "That privilege and wealth aren't automatically corrupting. That thinking bigger isn't selling out. That I could maintain my values while expanding my impact." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Their journey had been unconventional, messy, filled with mistakes and difficult lessons. But it had been real, more real than anything either had experienced before. Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from Richard. Another company wanted to learn about Wellington Technologies reforms, implement similar changes. Sarah's buzzed simultaneously. A senator's office requesting her testimony on conservation policy. Both would require travel, coordination, sacrifice of precious time together. But both were opportunities to extend their impact, to turn personal transformation into systemic change. "We should probably look at our calendars," Sarah said with a sigh. "We should," Marcus agreed. "But tonight let's just be here." So they stayed on the balcony as night fell fully, holding each other, grateful for the unlikely path that had brought them together. A billionaire who'd learned humility and authenticity in a one-bedroom apartment. A small-town woman who'd learned to think big without losing her values. Together they'd built something neither could have created alone. A life of purpose, impact, and genuine love. The mountains stood eternal around them, indifferent but somehow reassuring in their constancy. Whatever challenges tomorrow brought, they'd face them together. Whatever balance needed maintaining between wealth and simplicity, between ambition and contentment, between New York penthouses and Colorado apartments, they'd find it together. Marcus Wellington had started his journey searching for love without money. He'd found something infinitely more valuable: authenticity, purpose, and a partner who challenged him to be better while accepting him completely. The experiment that began with deception had ended with the deepest truth of his life. He looked at Sarah, her face peaceful in the mountain twilight, and felt the overwhelming gratitude of someone who'd gotten far more than he'd dared to hope for. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too," she replied. "All of you. The billionaire CEO and the guy who still helps Mrs. Patterson fix her computer. The complicated, messy, wonderful whole. And in the end, that was what mattered most. Not the money or the company or the reforms or the impact, though all of those had value. What mattered was being fully known and fully loved, not despite complexity but because of it." Marcus had learned that lesson in a small mountain town, and it had changed everything. As they headed inside, hand in hand, Marcus glanced back at the mountains one more time. Somewhere up there was Clearwater Falls, the place where everything had begun to shift, where Sarah had offered acceptance before confession, where he'd proposed, where they'd learned together what it meant to be real. The water was still falling, constant and eternal. And Marcus Wellington, formerly Marcus Reed, now simply and completely himself, was finally, truly home.